Tēnā koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui ki koutou katoa, everybody. Awesome to be joining you at lunchtime. So I hope you're sitting there with a cup of tea or a coffee or something good to eat. So I'm talking to you from Lake Rotomā. So I have Whakatane to my right, Rotorua to my left. So I'm in sort of that middle area there up in the native bush. So it's a pretty good place to be facilitating this session with you today. Look, I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully you can all see that there okay. So in the session today, we're talking a bit about this whole idea of kind of heading home, managing those transitions and how we find our off switch, for want of another way of calling it. Because I guess, we begin with some questions. Do you often have a sense that you're feeling like you're always on? Do you have a sense that actually getting out of that headspace of work is increasingly difficult to do? Or do you have a sense of kind of thoughts of work and work-related things rolling around in your head, a bit like marbles in a barrel? Is that something that happens for you? And for most of us, we're going to say probably a yes to some of that stuff. So the whakaaro, or the thinking behind today's session, is really thinking about taking our best self to our work. We want to take our best self to our workplace. We want to provide our best self to the clients that we work with, to the colleagues that we work alongside. But equally so, we want to take our best self home. And we want to have a sense that when we come home, that the people that we come home to connect with the best of us, not just what's left. And sometimes, when we're feeling tapped, and we're coming in at the end of the day and we're feeling a bit tapped out, it can be really hard to be kind of bringing that best self home to either, the people that we live with, or our fur babies, as some people will talk about, pets and things like that, or it might be children, might be flatmates, whatever that is for you. So this idea of best self to work and best self home. We think also that, if we're coming in at the end of the day, we open the door, there's a school bag inside the front door. There's crumbs all over the bench, a sink load full of dishes, that we might not respond that well to that. We might have a moment, you might say, but is it about the crumbs, the bag and the dishes? Usually not. It's actually about the fact that we're feeling already at capacity, and some of those things on top of that are just a push too far, or a sense that, that's just more than we can kind of manage on top of the day we've had. So if any of that's kind of connecting with you, then this is a great session to be in, right? It's a great session to be thinking then around, how can I manage those transitions, and what are some of the tools and techniques I can use to help me find that off switch and manage those things. So we think about home, we think about heading home at the end of the day, and we think about what are some of the techniques or some of the things that we can use to help us in that transition. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what colleagues and people that I speak with share with me around the way they do that. What I'd encourage you to do is to think a little bit about, if we look at this picture here of a kite, think about the tools you've already got. You will already have strategies. You will already have things that that if you do, they help you manage. They help you manage kind of turn off. They help you manage kind of head home and focus in on home. But just because we know something doesn't mean we do it, and that's the key thing. So we begin by revisiting our kite, because we want to remember the stuff that we know that works. So cast your mind back to when you've been managing those transitions well, and think about, what was it that you were doing then, and what of that could I be doing now? And that's a useful place to start, because it just acknowledges all that you already know. And so this idea that, because I know it doesn't mean I do it. It might, an example of that might be me knowing that if I grab some of those leftovers from tea tonight, pop them in my lunch, head to work with them, take a break at lunch, that up, sit, eat a good meal, and then get back into my work, that is going to work well for me. And when I'm doing that, it does work well. But when I'm not in that zone, when I'm not doing those things, it might be that I skip lunch. It might be that I don't even take a break. I don't eat anything. And then as I head home at the end of a busy work day, the magnetic pull of the yellow arches sees me in the drive-through before I know it, because I'm really hungry now. So, knowing it and doing it, two different things. So think about the things that when you're managing those transitions, what are some of the things that you're doing that are helping? Is it around your managing of time? Is it around how you're using that trip home? What is it that you're doing in that trip home space that's helping you? Or what are some of the things you're doing even before you leave work? Some people will say to me, actually, if I stop in that last 15 minutes and kind of really focus on capturing where I'm at for the day, and I might do that by chucking notes in my electronic calendar. So I might jump into my calendar, pop some notes in of all the stuff that's pending. I might jot that down. But where I do that and I capture that up, that helps me. And that helps me how? It helps me because when I come in the next day, the first thing I do is look at those notes. First thing I do is have a squizzy, see what it says in there. And that helps me from the alternative, which is having that stuff rolling around and trying to think, oh yeah, better not forget. Oh yeah, better not, not do that. Or not forget to do that, or make that meeting, or schedule that appointment. So the ways in which we can use our end of day can really kind of be one of the things that people will often talk to me about when they're doing it. That really helps them. What are some of the thoughts around things that people are doing? So sometimes what people talk about in terms of finding that off switch will be when they come in, the first thing they do is jump in the shower. So they find jumping in the shower, having a hot shower, imagining the day kind of heading down the drain, helps them kind of make that transition from work to home. Other people will say to me, actually, I just get out of my work clothes and change into something comfy. And that might be trackies and a t-shirt. And there's something just about even doing that helps me kind of make that transition from a workspace into a home space. And sometimes we're still even using these routines and practices when we're working from home, because it helps us just manage. Because when we're working from home, ironically, sometimes it can be even harder to manage those transitions because we kind of just stay working, or we keep floating back into it and doing more rather than having those kind of transition points. Other people will say to me, look, I get home, the first thing I do is walk the dog. Or if I'm at home, I'll head out with the dog, and that helps me. Others will say, I come in and my family know, give me 10 minutes. So I'll grab a coffee, I'll sit on the back doorstep, and people know not to talk to me for 10 minutes. So I get a chance to just kind of wind it down a bit for me, and that works. So have a think about those sort of things. For those of you that love music, we can use music. There's lots of evidence that music shifts mood, and it shifts mood faster than lots of other things. So, and we know that, right? Because if I'm listening to something and I listen to a tune, and even just the first few lines of it can bring a tear to my eye, it can take me back to a place or a time, an experience, or a memory of someone that's passed now. And we can have that, that emotional response to music. So think about how you can utilize that. If music speaks to you, what could you do to help do that turn off and help do that switch, manage that transition using music? Now, the University of Queensland's doing some work around an app called Music Escape, where you can sift and sort and swipe from sort of low in mood to high in mood, or from feeling angry and sort of angsty to calmer and swiping, and it sifts and sorts the playlist. So they're doing some work on that at the moment. But what you could be doing using Spotify is creating your own playlists. So if music resonates with you and it's something you find helpful, create a couple. Create a couple of playlists. One that's chilled. So mellow, chilled kind of music that is meaningful to you, and it has, a raft of things that are calming. And then equally so, another one that's of energy and upbeat, and create that playlist. So you might use those on your way to and from work to help manage those transitions. When you're feeling overwhelmed or distressed, you might use that calming set of kind of chilled music to help you as well. So draw on music as an example of something to do if it's something that resonates with you. Other people will say to me, part of my practice is I get out of work, get in the car, and I'll actually do some breath work before I start the drive home. So if you're interested in some work on breath, and there's some really interesting research and evidence showing that when we stay in that heightened stressed state, so we've got, we know what that heightened stress state can feel like. We know that we're breathing a bit shallower, a bit faster. We might feel our heart beating a bit faster in our chest. We know those signs in ourselves, right? Then have a look at doing some breath work. There's a really cool Kiwi woman called Sarah Laurie. She's created an amazing app called Take a Breath. Have a look at that if that's of interest to you. In the Take a Breath app, you can see a whole lot of little modules and videos. There's also some breath work exercises. There's some little notifications that can come to you if you switch them on to help remind you about that breath work across the day. If you are interested in doing some work around breath, and we're talking here about breath down into our belly, just like if we were looking at a baby sleeping, we'd see its puku going up and down, wouldn't we? Not its shoulders, not that upper chest breathing. So have a look at that. Tonight when you go to bed, you could take 10 breaths down into your tummy before you go to sleep. You could do the same tomorrow morning and just see what that difference is when we're altering that pattern or the way in which we're breathing. Because we're breathing way too fast, right? Way too fast, way too often, and way too shallow. So have a look at that if that's something that resonates with you. A mother said to me the other day, I thought a bit about how I was doing when I got home, and I was thinking, that sometimes when I hear myself speak to my children, it's not that great, or I hear myself say something and I think, oh, that wasn't good, that wasn't my best self. And so she said, one of the things that's worked for me now is the first thing I do when I walk in the door is we read a book together. So we kind of snug up on the couch. Everyone gets in together, we read the story. They're going to pick if I've missed a sentence or a page or anything, because they'll know those stories so well. And then when we're finished doing that, one of them will go and pick the book for the next day and sit it on the coffee table. And that's the first thing we do when we come in. And that's good for me because it just helps me settle into what I've got to do. I've got to concentrate, read the story. And it means we begin that transition with this really kind of nice time together. Quite a few people will cook. So they'll get in the door and they'll start to prep tea. One, because we all like to eat tea, right? But also because we can do that mindfully. So we can come in, and if I'm there at the kitchen and I'm cutting up carrots and I'm getting the broccoli ready and I've got my pots out and I'm doing my thing, I've got to think about what I'm doing. So I need to get out of my head and focus in on what I'm doing. And that can be really helpful for managing transitions as well. Because if I don't do that, then I'm likely to be chopping up more than the carrots, and we don't want, the end of a finger added to tonight's stir fry. So think a bit about, a whole raft of those sort of ideas. What of those would work for you? What of those could you do? Routine is good. Having that daily kind of routine to help you manage those transitions over can be useful. Others will say to me, look, I actually don't find it too bad when I come in, but the time that I struggle the most is when I try and go to bed. So there's something about the day and the busyness where I can kind of do okay. Then I jump into bed and suddenly, all the marbles in the barrel roll a bit more. And I find it really hard to go to sleep because these thoughts are there. So sometimes for people, they'll say to me often, I'll pop those out, I'll jot them down, or I'll write some notes to myself. We know from Massey University's Sleep and Wake Centre and all the good work that they're doing that there are some key things around our sleep that we can do. So what do those look like? A few things. We need a dark room. So we need our curtains pulled, we need our room as dark as we can have it. That might be blackout kind of curtains from spotlight, or it might simply be pegging up a blanket over the curtains if you've got light curtains. We need our room nice and cool, about 18 degrees, because we need a drop in core body temperature to go to sleep. It's not a good idea if we're eating before we go to bed. So, not eating for a couple of hours before we go to bed is a good idea. We need a wind down routine. So it's pretty hard for us to go from being alert and doing our thing to suddenly wanting to go to sleep. So if we've got half an hour to kind of wind down before we go to bed, that's pretty cool, and that's helpful for us as well. So what does that look like? You know, I might be like a lot of you, where suddenly I look at the time and go, whoa, and race outside, pegging, washing on the line in the dark, quickly making school lunch, these kind of things, and then hopping into bed and thinking, I'm not feeling like sleeping, you know? So what can be useful in that space for us is to think instead about, in that last half hour, we head into bed around 10:30, something like that. We know we need 7 to 8 hours sleep. Then it might be that half an hour before we go to bed that we come away from screens. And the coming away from screens means the TV, the computer, the phone. Yeah. We might dim some of the lights, or we might turn some of the lights off. We might have a cool drink. We might get our gear out for the next day, but we just kind of quietly be preparing ourselves for sleep, rather than just expecting to be able to sleep after kind of doing all the things that we are. Once we're in bed, we need to not be looking at our phone. And that's a bit tough for some of us, right? Because we use it as our alarm clock often. But that blue light and that looking at that phone certainly alerts us and doesn't help us with our sleep. So have a think about all of these different sort of ideas. What if that resonates with you? Or alternatively, are there things that you've thought about in this session where you're thinking, actually, I know if I just start again doing some of those things that I know work for me, I'll probably be way better. So sift and sort, take from it, a bit like a pick and mix, you know, take from it the things that resonate with you and think about what you can do. If it is that your idea of relaxing is doing it on your phone, and it's scrolling social media, it's looking at TikToks, it's on Facebook, just have a think about what you could do to have some of the relaxing time away from screen, because you're still on screen. You know, you're still in that space where you are looking and gathering in that information and all the time. So try and see what that could look like. It can also be good to look at, you know, having some silence, having some actual quiet, and having an opportunity to just be in that space for a bit. So have a think about how you could mix that up. What of those things, or if there's some of the things we've talked about today that you think, actually, I'd like to give that a go, then, you know, and it might be the app, Sarah's app that I was talking about before, then that can be, you know, a really useful thing to be doing. But yeah, a raft of things there. So we think about our family, and we think about, again, as we said, this idea of our best self to our work, but also our best self at home. There's some real benefit in us not being on all the time and being able to kind of manage those transitions. So we're thinking about how on the way home, we might be able to use those trips, whether we're on public transport or under our own steam, walking, cycling, driving, however we're doing that. How can I be using that to help me with that? And of the techniques I use, what of those could I also use when I'm feeling under the pump or overwhelmed? And those might be, you know, that time outside, connecting with nature. That might be listening to music, and music we love that resonates with us. It might be doing some stuff in the breathwork space, or whatever else those things are for you. So think about taking some breaks during the day, you know, even if they're micro breaks. It might be that you've just finished an important bit of work and a difficult phone call. You might take your headset off, walk across to the window, look and see what's happening outside, who's out there, what's the weather looking like, come back to your desk, and then next task. And that's just a small example of a micro break, you know. So when we're trying to find our off switch, we're much more able to do that when we're attentive and thoughtful around these breaks across our day. So look at how you can build and factor those in. You know, if you're overwhelmed at times, or you're feeling that things are getting really difficult, step away. Or look at mixing your tasks up. If you've got some heavy stuff, it might be you step out of that for a bit and you'd return a couple of simple phone calls, do a couple of meetings that you've got to set up, some lighter things. So you look at providing some diversity for yourself. So that mixing of task Yeah, a raft of ideas for us, really, but we don't have to always be on. That's the key thing. So my encouragement is, look at what you can do for you. Think about the sorts of things that you've done in the past that have worked for you. What of those could you do now? And then think about, from today's discussions and the things we've talked about, what would be of interest to you that you might want to have a look at. There's no right way or wrong way in managing transitions, but there is about what works for you. And my encouragement is to make some decisions around trying a couple of these things and see what works.